Welcome back to the Short Movie Channel. The movie begins with Rachel and her husband Matt traveling together to Matt's father's city. Rachel appears to be in the final months of her pregnancy. She talks to Matt, expressing her happiness about finally being pregnant after many failed attempts. She also shares that the doctor confirmed she's expecting a boy. Rachel seems to be planning to visit Matt's father and give birth there. During their journey, they discover that the main road to the city is closed due to ongoing maintenance work. This forces Matt to take a detour through the forest to reach their destination. While driving, Matt gets distracted for a moment, which is enough for him to crash into a tree blocking the road. Rachel screams to warn him, but it's too late. Matt quickly gets out of the car to check on Rachel and their baby after the accident. Thankfully, she's unharmed, but the car is completely wrecked and won't be able to continue the journey. Matt tries calling for help, but there's no phone signal in the area. He even climbs a tree, hoping to find some signal, but his attempts are unsuccessful. While looking around, Matt spots a nearby farm and suggests they head there to ask for help. They change their route and head toward the farm. At the entrance, they notice a sign warning people to stay away as it's private property. However, Matt ignores the sign and continues toward the farm with Rachel. On their way, they encounter the farm's owner, who immediately yells at them for trespassing. He tells them to leave at once. Matt tries to explain their situation, saying their car broke down and they need to get to the city, but the owner shows no interest in helping them. Matt then mentions that Rachel is pregnant and unable to walk long distances. He also explains that all he needs is to borrow a phone since his has no signal. Upon hearing about Rachel's pregnancy, the farm owner's attitude changes. He introduces himself as Bob and invites them to come inside to rest. He explains that a recent storm damaged the cell towers in the area, leaving the region without service. Bob uses a walkie-talkie to contact his wife, Agnes, and tells her they have guests heading to the farm. At first, Agnes thinks he's joking because they rarely get visitors, but she eventually agrees and starts preparing dinner. While walking toward the farm, Rachel notices a little girl standing between the trees, staring at them, which unsettles her. When they reach the farm, Agnes and her two sons, David and Luke, warmly greet them. Agnes welcomes Rachel and takes her to a room to rest, while Matt stays behind to meet the boys. However, the boys simply stare at Matt with strange looks and don't respond to him, making him feel uneasy. He enters the house, visibly nervous. Agnes shows them to a room where they can stay until dinner is ready. After she leaves, Rachel laughs and tells Matt she feels like they've stepped back in time, judging by the family's old-fashioned home decor and traditional tools. Rachel also points out that the children don't look alike, which makes her suspect they might be adopted. At that moment, we discover that Agnes is standing outside their room, listening to their entire conversation. Rachel looks out the window and reacts when she sees the same girl she saw in the forest standing there, watching them. Feeling frightened, Rachel calls Matt to come and see her. But by the time he goes to check, the girl has already disappeared. A while later, Agnes calls them for dinner. Everyone gathers at the table. She takes a photo while hugging her children and declares that they are her kids. She directs her words toward Rachel, who feels uneasy about the way Agnes talks. Bob asks where they are heading, and Matt replies that they are going to visit his mother in the town near the forest. At that moment, Luke speaks for the first time, saying that he wishes to visit the town because he's spent his entire life at home and has never met anyone before. Bob yells at him angrily, scolding him until he stops talking. Agnes laughs and says that Luke is always upset and disagrees with what they say. She adds that she's afraid for her children to mingle with people because humans have become evil and mentally unstable. Rachel notices a family photo that includes the same girl she saw in the forest. She finds it odd that the girl isn't present at dinner. When she asks about her, Agnes explains that the girl is shy and that her real parents used to beat her until she suffered a shock that made her mute. Agnes adds that after the girl's parents died in an accident, they adopted her. Agnes admits that she cannot have children of her own and that she adopted all of her kids. However, she loves them and treats them as if she were their biological mother. After dinner, Matt and Rachel return to their room. Rachel feels tense and tells Matt they need to leave this place. Matt tries to calm her down and suggests she get some rest. She agrees and lies down to sleep. While sleeping, Rachel has a nightmare about the girl sitting in her room in front of her parents' corpses. She wakes up terrified and shakes Matt awake. She tells him that the girl they adopted is the same girl who went missing 3 months ago after her parents were found murdered. She recalls that the media covered the story and realizes that Agnes and Bob must have killed the girl's parents to take her. She becomes certain they're in grave danger and insists they leave immediately. They quietly sneak downstairs, but as they reach the door, they find Bob standing behind them. Matt tells Bob that they need to leave now to avoid being late, and thanks him for his hospitality. But as they step outside, they are confronted by David and Luke, who are waiting for them with weapons. The 2 men attack Matt, striking him with their weapons until he loses consciousness. Then they inject him with a strong sedative. Meanwhile, Agnes and Bob restrain Rachel, who screams and struggles to reach her husband. Bob beats her until she also loses consciousness. When Rachel wakes up, she finds herself chained to a bed with iron shackles. She sees Agnes sitting in front of her. Agnes coldly tells Rachel that the baby in her womb now belongs to her. She declares that she will kill Rachel after the baby is born and raise the child as her own. As Rachel screams and calls for Matt, Agnes informs her that they've already killed him. Meanwhile, David and Luke are shown digging Matt's grave. Luke is visibly upset about what they're doing and expresses his disapproval. He accuses Bob and his wife of probably killing his real parents in the same way. David argues with Luke, telling him to stop talking like that. Despite his discomfort, they agree to bury Matt alive. Before doing so, they strip him of all his clothes and throw them into the coffin along with his lighter and cigarettes, mocking him the entire time. Rachel begins to feel the pain of labor, and Agnes arrives to help her deliver. Despite the excruciating pain, Rachel wishes she wouldn't give birth because she knows her baby will be taken away from her. After enduring great agony, Rachel finally delivers her child. Agnes discovers that the baby is a girl, which angers her because she had expected a boy. Not fond of raising girls, Agnes takes the baby and leaves the room. Rachel screams and pleads for her baby to be returned, but Agnes ignores her. Rachel attempts to free her hands from the iron restraints. After a lot of effort, she finally manages to break free. She grabs the cross hanging on the wall and hides it by her side. When Agnes returns to the room, she tells Rachel that she had planned to kill the baby after finding out it was a girl. However, she now believes it's a test from God to measure her patience and faith. She decides to raise the child and tells Rachel her only role is to breastfeed the baby and provide milk. As Agnes approaches her, Rachel pulls out the cross and strikes her with it. Before Rachel can escape, she finds the rest of the family in the room, who tie her up again, this time binding both her hands and feet tightly. Rachel begins to cry, asking them why they're treating her this way. Agnes responds by claiming she's doing the world a favor by raising devout children, far removed from the sinful modern world filled with atheism and immorality. Agnes explains that her family is pure and free from human sin. Rachel tries to talk to David and Luke, urging them not to believe Agnes because killing is a crime forbidden by all divine religions. She reveals that Agnes killed their families to kidnap and raise them. But before she can continue, Agnes quickly silences her, stopping her from convincing her sons. Agnes orders them to take Rachel to the barn, announcing that she will kill her after ensuring the baby is no longer dependent on her milk. Once everyone leaves, Rachel struggles to free herself but to no avail. She feels utterly helpless. Meanwhile, Matt regains consciousness to find himself buried in a coffin. He screams for help, but no one hears him. Using his lighter, he examines the cracks in the coffin. With all his strength, he breaks the coffin and crawls out from under the dirt, running through the forest and yelling for help. Rachel is still trying to free herself when Ellie shows up with food and water. Rachel devours the food hungrily, overwhelmed by her starvation. She tells Ellie that she knows the truth, that they killed her family and kidnapped her. Rachel pleads for Ellie's help, promising to escape with her from this dreadful place. However, Ellie doesn't respond and quietly leaves. Meanwhile, Matt, lost in the woods, hears voices nearby. He runs toward the sound and finds two campers. He begs them for help, explaining that a crazy family tried to kill him, buried him alive, and kidnapped his pregnant wife. He asks for a phone to call the police or some clothes to wear, but they don't believe him, thinking he's just a drunk. Matt tries to convince them, but when they refuse to listen, his frustration boils over. He attacks them, ties them to a tree, and takes their tools and one of their outfits. He warns them he won't release them until they tell him how to get to the farm. After they give him directions, he hands them a knife to free themselves and sets off toward the farm. At the farm, Agnes is caring for Rachel's baby. Her sons approach her, and David tells her that although Rachel gave birth to a girl, she could have a boy next time. He offers to marry Rachel. Agnes becomes furious and accuses him of corrupt thinking, which goes against the values she raised them with. She storms out of the room. David, angered, goes downstairs and tells Luke he will do what he wants. He takes Luke with him to stand guard while he heads to Rachel's room. At the same time, Matt arrives at the farm and sees Ellie pointing to where Rachel is being held. Matt heads there and finds David and Luke trying to assault Rachel, who is fighting them off. Matt strikes them with an iron rod on their heads, killing them instantly. He then rushes to Rachel, who can't believe her husband is still alive. Matt unties her and notices she's given birth. Rachel tells him she had a baby girl, but they took her away. Matt reassures her that they need to escape the farm as quickly as possible. Matt convinces Rachel that they have to leave without their baby for now, despite her objections. He explains they'll report everything to the police and rescue their daughter later. If they try to take the baby with them now, they might not make it out alive. Rachel reluctantly agrees, and Matt manages to free her from the chains. As soon as they open the barn door, they're shocked to see Bob standing there with a shotgun. He fires at them, and Matt shields Rachel, taking the bullet for her. He dies in her arms. Bob knocks Rachel out with the weapon, leaving her unconscious. The next day, Rachel wakes up to find herself tied up in the barn again. She sees Ellie in front of her holding a digging tool, which Rachel uses to free herself. By this time, Rachel has lost hope after witnessing her husband's death. She feels overwhelmed and defeated, resigning herself to the harsh reality she's living in. Meanwhile, Agnes is in denial about her sons' deaths. She dresses their corpses in their clothes, talking to them as if they're still alive. Bob, feeling sorry for her, tells her they need to bury the bodies because they're starting to decay. Agnes initially refuses but finally agrees, devastated that the children she dedicated her life to raising have died before her eyes. While Agnes and Bob bury the boys, Rachel decides she must escape to save Ellie and her baby. She manages to free herself, grabs Ellie, and breaks the chains around her neck. Ellie then guides Rachel to the room where her baby is being kept. Rachel finds her daughter crying and holds her for the first time since giving birth. Bob, realizing Rachel has escaped, grabs his gun and starts searching for her. He eventually finds her in the baby's room holding her daughter. Rachel calmly talks to Bob, telling him she's decided to live with them peacefully and take care of her daughter. Bob believes her, lowers his gun, and approaches her. But as he gets closer, Rachel reveals the knife she's hiding and stabs him to death. She then takes his phone and notices there's a signal. She calls the police, explaining that she's been kidnapped by a deranged family who killed her husband, and begs them to rescue her as soon as possible. At that moment, Rachel sees Agnes standing outside the house with a weapon in her hand. Rachel realizes she has no choice but to face Agnes. She takes Bob's shotgun, determined to either kill Agnes or be killed herself. She tells Ellie that if she doesn't return, Ellie should take the baby and escape to find the police for help. Rachel steps out and confronts Agnes with the shotgun. She fires but misses every shot. Agnes, however, lands her first shot, hitting Rachel in the leg and knocking her to the ground. Smiling, Agnes walks toward the car to grab the baby, but Rachel drags her down and slams her head into the ground repeatedly until she's dead. Rachel takes Ellie and her baby and finally escapes the farm. She collapses on the ground when she sees the police approaching. The officers help her and take her baby. After that, she starts explaining what happened to the police, feeling very tired, as if she were delirious. Suddenly, Agnes appears from behind the car, holding a rifle and tries to kill Rachel. But at the last moment, the officer shoots her and kills her. Rachel then breathes a sigh of relief. As she looks around, she realizes that Ellie is no longer there, and no one can see her. In the distance, she sees a figure, and she realizes that Ellie is either a ghost or has become so used to the wilderness and solitude that she has adapted to it, after being consumed by loneliness. The paramedics then arrive and take her away, still in shock from everything that happened. And that's how today's movie ends. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.